Good. Even if they're just referring it to another,
Absolutely.
to another doctor saying he doesn't.
I think, was it Dabney Ewing, MD, that said that? It might have been.
Maybe, yeah.
But again, we've talked about Dabney Ewing before, who's demonstrated that the correct torque limits post-burn inflammation in a burns unit, limits injury, increases recovery time.
Right.
And again, it's my belief that anybody involved in emergency medical work, paramedics, should be taught basic hypnotic process, because folks, and again, remember, if you're ever working with or you have a relative or a friend and something occurs, an accident, they're in a hypnotic state right there and then.
Immediately.
Their critical faculty has been completely bypassed, and the reason is quite simple. The conscious mind is not fast enough to protect them. So the subconscious mind immediately says to the conscious mind, get out of the way, I'm handling this. I know what needs to be done to keep this person alive. But by the same token, they're in a totally open to suggestion.
Right.
And you can use that very effectively and powerfully or badly. We're going to have a show just about that. But,
right, exactly.
But,
yeah. But that's right. I mean, so the best thing is you come up and say, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be fine.
Yep.
And because they are really open.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. And I experienced it myself in a bike car accident. And I remember after we did hypnosis for a while, this had occurred many years before I had been learning hypnosis. And at one point I came back and you said, are you in a hypnotic state if you're in an accident? And you said, oh yeah, because I hadn't learned that principle yet. And because I remember how it felt, and it felt the same. And times it seemed to slow down.
Yes.
As I flew over this hood of this guy's car that hit me, I looked over and could see his reaction. I saw the moment he really saw me in his eyes, and it was a strange experience. But it was, the subconscious pushing aside the conscious mind, saying, "I got this." Because here I'm flying through the air, and it's trying to figure out how do I save me,
right.
That kind of a thing. So all those kind of things are really important.
Right.
And so now so one of the things we can do is, because the best thing would be to teach doctors, like you said.
Oh, doctors and nurses.
Don't say this, say that.
Yeah.
Right? Even if they want to prepare you for a little pinch of pain, they don't say that. Say it might be slight discomfort.
Yeah, or or simple wording like you may feel me working there, but it's not going to disturb
right.
you in any way.
Exactly.
And again, they're not lying to the person. They're not. I'm sure they can say that within the bounds of insurance and legal boundaries, whatever they have to stay with.
Right.
But it makes such a huge difference.
It does. It really does, and so forth. And the other thing that we do in a pre-surgery hypnosis too, though, is because we can't affect those behaviors, we can give suggestions that any negative remarks that you hear, anything like that, will just run off you like water off a duck's back, and you'll be actually sad for the doctor that they don't understand what you know about it,
right.
that this won't bother and everything will be fine.
And again, a point Bill made earlier, all of these things that we're describing here, you may say to yourself, well, I could just think that, or I could just talk about that, and you can, but these things that we talk about, they have an effect on you when you're in a state of hypnosis. Bypass of the critical faculty and the omission of acceptable selective thinking. It's not just enough just to talk about them, think about them. Even if you do that repeatedly, in that hypnotic state, they can be deeply, deeply powerful. Outside of that state, they're just words, which
right.
don't have very much effect at all.
Right. That's why, the good positive self-talk is good, but it only talks to the conscious mind.
Yes.
And you really need to get to the subconscious mind. You've done dental anesthesia where you just anesthetize your mouth with hypnosis. Well, I can tell myself as many times as I want in a conscious state, well, this won't hurt.
Right.
This won't hurt. It will hurt.
Right.
It'll still hurt. But I installed the suggestions that I wouldn't feel any pain.
No.
And I went and got in a hypnotic state. I did this.
Yeah.
Dropped myself into self-hypnosis and gave myself these suggestions. And I went and had drilling done and felt absolutely no pain.
Yeah, and Bill, I remember you saying that the procedure began, you weren't even aware that it had begun. You didn't think anything was happening yet.
No,
right?
the funny part was...
Until the dentist checked to ask you how you were doing. It's like,
well, yeah,
what?
he was concerned because he knew I was using hypnosis. He said, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I'm wondering why he's asking me, because I think he couldn't have done anything yet.
Right.
you know, and I knew he was working a little bit there, but there was no pain associated with it.
Right.
And he again checked halfway through. I was stunned. I didn't feel anything.
So just talking about this again, referring to our the great Dave Ellman, he identified. We've talked before in hypnosis about somnambulistic and non-somnambulistic states, and there is a state called false somnambulism, which, as a hypnosis practitioner, you have to be trained to distinguish between one and another. Believe me, you don't want to have a procedure done or suggestions in a state of false somnambulism.
Right.
Because as Mr. Ellman said in that 1950 style, it would hurt like the very devil.
Right, exactly.
But once you've got that somnambulistic state, then all of these suggestions, including the suggestion that the procedure goes, that your body and systems and everything cooperate, work with the procedure, even to the extent, one of the colleagues writes, I think it was Brenner, that you can actually reduce the amount of bleeding significantly, but you better make sure that the surgeon knows that.
Right.
Otherwise, they may be surprised that there's far less bleeding than there would normally be in other procedures. So you ask the surgeon, the hypnotist does, what do you want? What's the ideal situation? And so you create the background for that ideal situation. And I think there are examples given of where surgery was conducted using hypnosis and pre-surgery hypnosis where far less blood was needed because far less was lost. Of course, the surgeon needs to know that, otherwise they might be worried that something untoward is occurring.
Right.
But it's simply the power of the mind acting on the body.
Right.
So,
and that's the thing. We will always get referral from a surgeon saying knows what we're doing, right?
Yes.
And make sure that he understands what we're doing,
Right.
And so forth. It's an adjunct. It's a help to them and so forth.
Yes. And we want to work. This is very, very important. We always want to work with the medical professionals. We want to make what we're doing enhance what they're doing,
right.
and be helpful to them. We're a team.
Right.
We're working with the subconscious mind as it works through the body. They're working with the body and the mind.
Right.
So together we work in it in different ways. That's why I believe everybody should have pre and post-surgery hypnosis, because it makes everything easier, better, more effective. Everybody would be happier.
Well, this is it. And you're right about working with them. My dentist, we had agreed I was going to do this beforehand. He'd seen a demonstration in dental school, so he knew, well, yeah, it does work. And so, but before I went in, I said, I'd like to try it. And he said, okay, and so forth. You always want to work in conjunction with them.
Yeah.
But we've talked about during the surgery and so forth and let's talk about recovery.
Right.
How does hypnosis help in recovery?
Well, after the procedure is complete, it's my belief that as soon as possible afterwards, even if possible, now it's not always possible for the hypnosis practitioner to be there, but if nurses in recovery rooms where anaesthesia had been given were aware of it, they could immediately give very, very helpful post-hypnotic suggestions for healing, repair, recovery. And so once again, once the procedure has been completed, as a formal hypnotic procedure, another session would be to emphasise not just that, which is very important, but also to ensure that no ideas have crept in about recovery, rates of recovery, what might happen, damage to the body, limitations. My mother, many years ago, she's no longer with us, she's dead now, but she fell, she broke her arm and she had to have a pin in her arm. And she was absolutely told that she would never be able to straighten that arm beyond about this. So if you can see it beyond about that, or move it beyond here. She was told it was impossible physically.
Right.
So again, this isn't hypnosis, folks, but you're going to see compounding. So my mother liked to knit. She liked to knit and crochet, and she wasn't going to stop knitting and crocheting. And then a year later, she went to a doctor for a follow-up, and he said, "Well, of course you can't move it like that because of the procedure." And she just proceeded to straighten her arm, move it in all the places that she was told she couldn't move it.
Right.
So should everybody be knitting or doing crochet at the end? Maybe. But the point is that she just, I think at some level she just wasn't willing to accept that limitation. But she didn't take it on. She just quietly went about her business, did what she did and let the body recover. And in the absence of very strong ideas that said, you can't do this, she was giving herself a physical and emotional demonstration constantly of the fact that she could do it, right? And so what was bypassing the critical faculty? Knitting, crocheting, right? Good hypnosis, right?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with it. So
yeah.
now, of course, we can make that much more effective, not the knitting, but the process by ensuring that somebody comes and has a powerful, deep set of surgical or post-procedural suggestion.
Right.
And numerous examples have now occurred of people just recovering a whole lot more quickly, more completely.
Right.
It's remarkable.
You know, in that case of your mother, it'd be interesting. I gotta believe that deep inside in her subconscious, she believed, no, I'm still gonna do this.
Right.
And so, like we say about telling them that, giving them suggestions that any negative comments will wash off them,
Right.
she probably was doing that herself.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe that and I've never said this to you actually, but I think certain repetitive motions have a tendency to put us in a hypnotic state.
I believe that's certainly the case.
You know, because I never could understand it. When I'd go out on my bicycle, I'd have all these thoughts. Some of my best ideas came on my bicycle. And
Yeah.
I always said it was the spinning of my legs.
Well, you remember one of
on
the inductions that we do involves people turning their hands.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Right. They said sometimes folks when there's certain people who they're so busy analysing everything that we're doing that it's hard for them to work with us in hypnosis. And sometimes there's literally one called the arm spin, where you have people spin their hands or spin their legs. You watch me do that a couple of times, right? And they're so occupied in doing this that there's an easier bypass of the critical faculty.
Right.
So again, if we keep bearing in mind that definition, it's the bypass of the critical faculty, which is the wedge into hypnosis, and the admission of acceptable selective thinking.
Right.
Then we see how so many things are conducive of the induction of a hypnotic state.
Right.
And also how things can be compounded.
Right.
The other important thing is compounded over time. So what we're compounding in post-surgical procedural work is we're compounding health, healing, happiness, a return to a state of homeostasis, a return to a state of abundant health, a reminder of the effectiveness of what's been done, of the care and the skill of the medical professionals, all of those things go into it. And those are reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. And we give also people specific tools, self-hypnotic tools to do that.
Right.
So they allow their bodies to heal and repair with the aid of their mind.
Right. And like you say, so to be clear, you're giving these recovery suggestions actually before the surgery even.
Yes.
And then you might reinforce them
Right.
in a session afterwards.
Correct.
And like you said, if let's say something untoward happened during the surgery or whatever, it could cause an emotional reaction. It could, make the healing slower. And so you address that in that post.
I mean, again, somebody that didn't have hypnosis, but as an example, went in for one procedure and then finished up having to have a hysterectomy.
Right.
Now, of course, it was necessary. Fibroids she had. The fibroids was much larger. There was bleeding. Without that hysterectomy, she would have died.
Right.
Now, she didn't have any pre or post hypnosis, but I'm sure it would have been beneficial. But here's the other thing. She went into that procedure thinking that she was going to have children, and then came out of that procedure and then she wasn't able to have children.
That's huge.
And so obviously there are a whole series of things that occur. And that wasn't any fault of the surgeons, it was just what was necessary in that moment. That was the surgical conditions,
Right.
the medical conditions she faced.
Right.
And I'm absolutely convinced that if in those sort of circumstances where a procedure goes beyond what was anticipated or planned and may have a completely life-changing effect upon somebody, then hypnosis is going to be very, very helpful. Of course, both in the handling the feelings, emotions and sensations, but in the actual recovery from the procedure.
Right.
Because there may be so much resentment, anger there, that the procedure went beyond what was agreed, what was expected, what the person was primed for, that it's going to impede recovery.
Right.
And again, we're really emphasising this point, body and mind are linked. They're
Right.
not separate units.
Right.
It's not, you're not a machine.
Right.
You're an incredible organism with an intelligence in it.
Right.
And it's all operating together.
Right, exactly, And that's one of the things is, I mean, in that case, it's going to impede recovery, but also you have a whole emotional set that maybe you need to deal with because of that change, especially when someone's expecting to have children.
Oh yeah, I mean,
You know,
huge.
that's really huge. So one of the things, so we talked about a lot of different things here, but I know I asked you earlier, when you've done this, how many sessions do you do?
Really, we only really need to do 2 sessions, one before and one after.
Right.
Every so often, we'll run across something where, you know, somebody has something very, very deeply emotionally connected to a procedure. For example, there was one example given of a lady who had a firm belief that she'd held since she was a little child, that she, at some point in her life, she was going to die on an operating table.
Right.
Now, in that instance, I'd want to do some form of regression. I'd want to go back to see when that idea was first established, why it was established, clear it out, then give suggestions.
Right.
I wouldn't want that person to have a procedure done as long as that belief was there. And in that particular case, an example, the surgeon was very intelligent. He discovered that, wasn't willing to schedule her for surgery until that had been dealt with. She had a procedure, everything was successful. She had to have another procedure, but that idea re-established itself, I think, a year or 2 years later, and nobody told the same surgeon, and she died on the operating table for no really good medical reason.
Right. So was that a case where they handled it with direct suggestion?
Yes.
So basically, she's coming into, and this doctor didn't want to do the procedure because of that deep-seated belief.
Right.
But a hypnosis practitioner gave her direct suggestions. Basically, that's not going to happen. You're going to recover.
Right. And she
you're
did.
Gonna be fine. And she did. And now, but now she goes a year later to a new surgeon who doesn't know about this deep-seated belief, doesn't have the direct suggestion beforehand.
Right.
And the result was
She died.
she died.
And and again, there was no medically complicated reason. Now, here's the 2 very important things from a hypnotic standpoint. Number 1, the direct suggestion was effective.
Right.
And my guess is it would have been effective again if having been given, I think. But if that lady had had the sort of regression work back to the cause of where that idea gets seeded, established and grown, and it's then pulled out of the root, she'd have been free of that forever.
Right.
And that's the difference between just direct suggestion and the combination of the 2 procedures. So for me, in that instance, I'd have preferred to do some direct suggestion, some regression followed by direct suggestion hypnosis, and then she'd be in much better shape because, you know, if I'm not around, or if a hypnosis practitioner isn't available to her, then that idea is gone, it's dead, it's over, it's finished.
It never
forever.
comes back,
Yeah.
So I mean, if you know, we talk about, you know, you generally do one before and one after that, assumes direct suggestion techniques.
Yes.
And things like that. Now, if I was going in and you talk to them about their fears and the issues and stuff, if I found some really deep-seated trauma that was driving certain things like that, if there was enough time before the surgery, and if they wanted to handle it, then I would do a couple of regression sessions.
Yes.
And like you say, get rid of that idea altogether.
Right.
And then give them positive suggestions for healing and all that. And
and so one of the things that we do is that we interview people.
Right.
We interview them and we make sure, you know, what's the procedure, what's the background, what's going on, have they had it before, what's happening.
Right.
Again, like everything that we do, it's not just a question of bringing somebody in, putting them in a chair, bring them into a hypnotic state, whacking in a few suggestions and sending them home. We need to find out about who it is we're dealing with. And a good hypnosis practitioner will tailor the session to what it is that you want and need.
Right.
And so it's a very clear understanding. So again, if you ask a hypnosis practitioner to do this and they say, "I'll come in 45 minutes and you're gone," it's not the same thing that we're talking about.
Right.
We spend quite a period of time talking with people, understanding what's going on, and you know, in the case of a procedure, we may want to ensure that we're in contact, you know, as far as we can be, with a surgeon to let them know what's happening, what we're doing. That's not always possible.
Right.
But where we can, we want to be a helpful part of that team. We want to understand the person that we're with.
Right.
Because you're not just a machine. You're a living, intelligent human being. And we need to understand what's happening consciously as well as subconsciously.
Right. And just to really emphasize that, really, we have a program that we do this, but it's really tailored to every individual.
Yes,
it's really built for them.
Right, and that's a really good point, Bill. And again, when you're seeking hypnosis, if you are, by a program, we don't mean a cookie cutter, it's the same for everybody. We mean there are a set of milestones, procedures, key areas, but those are individually tailored for each person.
Right.
Just in the same way as a medication may have a whole range of benefits, but the dosage of that medication is tailored for the condition, for the individual.
Right.
In the same way, we modify what we do.
Right.
And a part of that, we have to find out about who it is that we're working with and talking
Exactly.
to.
And the fact is, to talk about the regression again, if we found a deep and emotional trauma, if there wasn't enough time, we can just do direct suggestion.
Right.
It will work for the time during the surgery. And then if the client wanted to follow up and do some regression sessions afterwards, we can do that.
And here's the amazing thing that we can do. We can do a regression set, and this is going to sound very strange at first, but we can do a regression session after the surgery, regress you to before the surgery, take you through that surgery hypnotically, with all the positive suggestions, rooting out anything there, and all the results become better. And that's only possible in the subconscious mind, folks, because the subconscious mind doesn't see past, present and future, it sees an eternal present. And so, believe it or not, we can do pre-surgery work post-surgery. It's
Right.
not ideal, I wouldn't choose always to do it that way, but it's amazing what we can do. In a sense, when the description with the lady with the gallbladder removal, that's what was done. They didn't change the procedure, they just changed her perception of the procedure, and all of a sudden, the procedure itself becomes better and more effective.
Right.
And her pains go away.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's extraordinary. And again, that's the power, folks, of your subconscious mind. That's what we're working with.
Right. Yeah. So I'm looking at my notes here, trying to see what else do we need to cover.
I don't know. It's I would say that this is an area of hypnosis that if anybody out there is a medical professional, a doctor, a nurse, or knows them, and we would love to be able to talk to doctors and nurses about how this can be of benefit, how it can be incorporated in what's done.
Right.
And so, without that, without the buy-in of the medical professionals, we're going to get a limited opportunity to do this. And it saddens me a great deal that more people don't find this for pre and post.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I did look at my notes that we didn't touch on, that when we talk about tailoring it to the person, their emotions, and so forth, their deeply held beliefs about themselves, the surgery, and all this and that. But it's also the type of procedures they're having.
Yes.
So, cosmetic procedure.
Yes.
Versus a removing a tumor.
Right.
Or something like that. And if you've got someone going in for, say, liposuction, is it really, what are they really looking for?
Yes.
What's their goal?
Yes.
Well, they want to look better.
Right.
Right. But it also goes to a deep-seated belief in themselves and so forth. Have you worked with people in that regard, with cosmetic procedures?
I'm trying to think. I actually think I don't know if I've ever worked with anybody for a purely cosmetic procedure.
Right.
Although I'd like to. Now, I think the reason is because people have this view that if it's a purely cosmetic procedure, they can't, emotions aren't associated with it. Even though, ironically, we know, of course, emotions are the more fully associated with that than anything else.
Right.
Because it's an elective procedure; they don't have to have it, and so I think it's actually more important for those procedures. But again, the general view is people feel positive about the procedure. They feel relaxed because it's elective. I'm going to have this part of myself change because I'm going to feel better when it's different. And therefore they feel that they don't need to have any. We don't need to be relaxed. We don't need to feel good. I already feel good about it.
Right.
But what we're saying, again, I'm so glad you mentioned it, is so much beyond just feeling good about what's happening, or at least feeling okay. It's about using the body and mind together to enhance everything that's occurring.
Right. Right.
And
So that's one other thing that I thought. Well, two things I want to say on that is, number one, again, like I said earlier, you might think you're relaxed about it, but you still may not be.
Right.
So it's always a good idea to actually do it.
Right.
And the other one that came to me too is we can teach them self-hypnosis.
Absolutely, and we teach a basic form of self-hypnosis, but we talk about a session before, a session after. It's quite useful to have one more session to teach specifically self-hypnosis.
Right.
Because it helps in the healing and recovery process.
Right.
A few years ago, I did something very silly, which resulted in a tear to my rotator cuff.
Right.
And there are relatively few things that you can do outside of surgery. And I decided to use purely hypnotic procedure to rehabilitate that injury. It's okay, folks. If you have a rotator cuff injury, you can't make some of these movements. And it was this shoulder. And pure hypnotic work,
Right.
pure mind and body stuff. I didn't have any additional procedure at all.
Right.
So that it was all using self-hypnosis.
Right.
And again, there's a lot of things, we're going to devote something just to self-hypnosis on a future show and what that is. But
Right.
I prefer to have people learn it, use it and do it because it enhances everything, and it's a tool that they're going to be able to use for all manner of things as well,
Right.
as we've talked about in other regards on the show before.
So one of the other things is, with the pre-surgery, is we can go in and deal with these perhaps deep-seated fears and this and that in different ways and so forth. But we can also give them a peaceful place to go.
Yes.
In their mind. Yes. I know when I did my dental anesthesia, you suggested to me, well, put a peaceful place within yourself hypnotically that you can go to. I picked the beach.
Yeah, peaceful place, a happy place, a laughing place.
Right, exactly. And so as I'm sitting in the chair and they're getting ready to do it, I basically brought myself into a hypnotic state, and we say tapped in, and I had given myself the suggestion when I touch my forefinger and thumb that I'll go to that beach.
Right.
And I'll feel the warmth of the sun on me.
Right.
I'll hear the gentle lapping of the waves.
Yeah, give yourself a suggestion. And again, I want to really emphasise, folks, you can say these things to yourself.
Right.
People sometimes call it creative visualisation. It's not going to have the same effect as when you're in a deep hypnotic state.
Right.
The words might sound the same, the intention might be the same, but the hypnotic state is not the same.
Right.
And so, when Bill's mind or anybody's mind is locked around these suggestions in a hypnotic state, it has an effect.
Right.
Very, very important to distinguish the difference. And not easy for average people, unless they're trained in this process, to readily observe and understand.
Exactly. And one of the things, like in that case, what I found was I wasn't feeling the pain, but you can also have fear of anticipation. Well, is it going to kick in? But I realized when I was always at the dentist, my hands were like this.
Right.
And I realized because of the deep relaxation and the place that all of a sudden I realized, well, my hands were like
just
like
relaxed,
this.
yes.
Relaxed, and I went, wow. And so you can imagine the rest of my body was relaxed too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so, it can have an effect on how easy things go.
Absolutely.
So I think we're down to 1 minute, aren't we?
We're less than 1 minute now, so
Okay.
we're almost at, once again, if you're considering this for yourself or friends, and you want to talk to a hypnosis practitioner about how they can help you, I encourage you to call. Encourage others. We're happy to talk about it to groups. We'd love to do so.
Right.
And until that time, or until the next show, thank you very much for watching this edition of Hypnosis Helps with me, Neil Myers, and my colleague, Bill Miller. And next time we'll have another interesting talk about how hypnosis can help in another area of our lives and your lives.
Sounds good.
Thanks.